The last thing that our business was lucky enough to win was a Global Volunteerism Award from IBM, who are one of our primary vendors. Volunteerism isn't actually a new horrible American word, it's really an old word for volunteering and for giving back. And we won that because of one of our pledges as a business. So each of our guys do 5 days of experiential stuff. It doesn't have to be a busman's holiday. Some of them do driving for cancer charities, but a lot of them are going and do tech strategy for charities. And what it means is they bring pretty good experience back into the business. So it's very good for our business, and it's very good for the charities that we work with. It's great for profile. If you're doing any public sector work, the ability to win the fluffy part of the tender, as it sometimes gets called, which it absolutely isn't, is normally taken care of. So we've had a few things. We also won a technical award, and that helps us with getting into tier 1 companies. So I'm going to chat a wee bit about how we deal with our place in the market. We started off as a small business. We started off doing small business support. And through a constant investment in tech and training of our team, we worked our way up the food chain. So dealing with small business customers was extremely frustrating. They didn't understand a lot at the time. You were educating first. I was very fortunate that one of the companies I worked for was acquired by a UK business to complete their UK portfolio. They purchased a Scottish business, as often happens. And that gave us an opportunity to grow with them. I thought I was going to lose my business at that point because I had 80% of my business coming from one customer. That's a very common mistake for tech businesses at the beginning. So don't do that one, because it's a rather risky strategy. After I got past that, we moved into analytics and doing data reporting. My own background's maths and physics. I mentioned I did tuition. And as we moved up into that space, we found the rates were better. We were dealing with more professional organisations. They understood what we were pitching about. And frankly, business became a lot easier in that space. So I guess understand the niche in which you wish to operate. Don't seek to be all things to all men. Techie businesses sometimes start with a niche focus on the business plan. An opportunity arises. And I would say in technology companies, more than many other businesses that I come across, that diversification which happens, which means businesses defocus, they come out of the niche, they don't become as attractive to the businesses that look to procure their services, and they get completely distracted. So understand the space you're in. More recently, the analytics space has brought us into security. So for the last 2 or 3 years, I opened a security practice, and we've been growing that out in security and anti-fraud. We couldn't have timed it better, and that's really now over 60% of our business. And 3 years ago, we weren't doing any of it really, other than security parts that were related to infrastructure. Which is why I would say that the rate of change in IT is something which is extremely important for people to understand. If you're not niche, the trend in technology at the moment is very much away. Leading analysts in Gartner, IDC and Forrester are all talking about the death of the mega vendor. No one's going to hire a tier 1 company to deliver all kinds of everything, and businesses are becoming more open to dealing with niche suppliers. Even this morning I had a meeting with a Scottish utility company, and they were saying that 2 years ago they wouldn't have, we're just over £7 million in turnover, and we were told that just over 2 years ago they wouldn't have been able to procure from a business of our size. There aren't many other indigenous Scottish IT companies doing that kind of business. There's the FanDuels and there's the Skyscanners who are doing niche things, and they're massive, but people who are doing the more generic parts of the IT portfolio, the tech space, great. So I'll just cut to a couple of slides here. This is some of the things we picked up. In terms of balance, this is one of the things where tech companies go wrong. They don't get the balance right between people, tech, process. What is your business about? If you don't have the management team, you don't have the ethics and the space you want to map out to be in, understood by your team, and it's not communicated regularly, you're not going to be the business that you want to be. You can't focus on tech all the time. So this is our ethical stance. This is how we communicate this to our customers. 5% of our profits, 2% of our time, which we equate to 5 days. And the things that we are interested in are digital participation. So it may interest you to know that 24% of people in Scotland aren't online, right? Aren't online and active online and in a safe place. So we can't take vulnerable people coming out of jail, out of homelessness, and expect them to use and access the facilities of the state if they're not enabled online. Why make vulnerable people also vulnerable online? So that's an area that we're interested in. And Lord Hockey talked about engineering. We're involved in smart STEMs. I set this up myself. It's a thing to drive science, technology and engineering, particularly among young women. We're running an event in Glasgow Cali on the 3rd of June if you know any young women who are interested in that sort of thing. I've touched on a couple of these bits, SCADA, analytics, security, and that's the space in which we find ourselves now. I touched, before I had the slides here, I got to the death of the mega vendor. So previously, there was huge acquisition in IT. Companies like IBM, HP, all acquiring to create a position where they could serve your every need. I think the death of the mega vendor is upon us. I think they will drop down in terms of what they do. And I think the rise of the super niche, the absolutely niche supplier. So if you've got your niche and you know what you're going to address, I think the timing has never been better. Larger companies than would have procured a small business in the past are more likely to do it now than at any time since we've had tech, in my opinion. The Internet of Things presents, oh my God, what an amazing opportunity that gives to anybody in tech land. So if you're in that space, the opportunities are fantastic. And if anyone hasn't, I was asked to do a wee bit of position piece. If you haven't, please have a look into the Singularity University, and this is about artificial intelligence, how that will outstrip the pace of the rate of change for human beings in tech. So this is how I believe techies get it wrong or make mistakes. I think I've written at the top of the slide there. So I think IT is about 20 years behind engineering in terms of their broad professionalism. Those of you who are old enough to remember things like the Channel Tunnel project, IT projects in health and various industries going massively over budget without lean techniques and all this sort of modern stuff that we have now. That's only starting to come into IT, and certainly in public sector and large-scale projects. I'm still only seeing agile methodologies being put in places. It's not in the main. So I think there's a general lack of professionalism. I think it's a dirty secret in IT, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it. But I think we consistently don't hit deadlines and don't. Just as an industry, we're not quite where we can be. So I would encourage you to make deadlines and all the things that are not tech part of what you do. I think, and Jim spoke about investment, techies take dumb money. They think they're smart enough to be smart and be all the smarts in the smart business, because invariably they're started by smart people. So please recognise that just getting a fat check off some guy that's not going to add anything to your business technically or in soft skills is a complete waste of time, because the bits that you are good at are not the bits that you're probably going to have to focus on in the very near future. Another area where techies tend to screw up when they're getting their money is they have truth Tourette's. So before they get the deal signed, they've already given away all their IP to somebody. So it's different if you're just taking investment, but it may be at the point of acquisition, they've sometimes given a lot of things away and they've devalued what they could get out of the procurement process. So find out who the guy is in your team that kind of keep his mouth shut and keep him away from that part of the process. This one's a bit highbrow, but confusing knowing with being. So I think one of the things that happens in a tech business is people think because they can map out and understand a process within their business very well, they can map it out, understand it, and communicate it to a third party. They confuse that knowing the process with the ability to execute or deliver on that process. And so I would counsel all of you to think about when you understand something and when you are able to execute on something, and recognise the difference between those two positions. Other most common problem I've seen over the last 10 or so years, sticking with the super techie who has no social skills and who causes absolute problems in the business. Just, you know, the number of businesses I've seen accelerate their growth once that guy gets a bullet is just, it's almost all of them, right? Maybe you, right? Don't know who it is, right? So broadly, the undervaluation or lack of valuation sometimes completely of complementary and soft skills. Understanding that your team has to have that wealth of bias, that wealth of different talent in your organisation to be successful. And this collective noun, a confusion, is normally applied to politicians, but a confusion of mentors. I think it's okay for people to have multiple mentors, and I was pleased to hear Jim talking about getting business cards and people mentoring and things like that. I do some of that, and if I can help some of you in some way, I'd be happy to do that. But recognise what guy you're pulling in for what job, and don't get too much overlap. Right? If we're thinking Venn diagrams, because I'm a mathsy person, we don't want that intersection bit to be too big. Right? You want a little bit of it, because you want to have some conflicting stuff and people giving you that wealth of bias, that wealth of diverse and perspective, but you don't want to have one guy telling you to go hard left and another guy telling you to go hard right, because then you won't make any progress. And this is a business we're in, right? We win one opportunity, and then we screw it up a bit, and we don't screw it up as much the next time we win it, and then hopefully we get better at it. But the way we can limit that is by applying measurement, and techies, we think we're quite good at measurement, but we don't often apply it to ourselves. So think about what KPIs and what measurements, Paul Talkie talked about dashboarding and understanding what's going on in the business. Apply that to your processes and your people as much as just straight tech, right? Yeah, it's a Ricky Gervais one. I think this is really, really important. I think mentoring is more valuable than money. When I got started up, I got a grant for £700 and a loan for £700, and the mentor I got was currently at that time was charging £1,500 a day doing mentoring services. It doesn't take a genius to work out what was more valuable. The guy couldn't get rid of me, still not get rid of me. He's late 80s now, he's only just given up digging the church garden, but he's sharp as a tack and first class. You know? So get your hooks in, don't let go. This is what I believe we need to be successful, and I think this pervades beyond a technology business. So I think we need to be resilient, and by that I mean, I think we in entrepreneurship have a corrupted view, or a very modern view, and a non-standard view of what failure is. We talk very comfortably about it's good to fail, but when we speak to our granny about it being good to fail, she kind of work out what we're talking about. So just understand the lexicon that you have when you're using entrepreneurship language or tech language with others, and be resilient. Recognise you're going to make some mistakes on your journey to being successful. Next one's plasticity, which is a lovely neuroscience word. Plasticity is the ability to retain a shape under deformation. So if something happens to you, you'll learn from it. That's kind of what plasticity is, right? So you've learned not to do that again. That only happens if you record what's happened and what you've done and why it went wrong. So if you're not having wee Chinese Parliament debriefs on the last project that you did, even if it went well, could it have gone better? What does a really good one look like? That's what, building that plasticity into your team and your process is important. To be successful, I think one needs a good network, and clearly coming along to things like this is really important to help build out that network of support. Often overlooked, where we stick our elbows out and push to strive to the front, is good grace. Recognise those that support you on your journey, don't forget them. Don't let them take all the credit for your hard work, because primarily you'll drive your own business, but recognise those that have supported you, because please and thank you will get you pretty far. I think you need options, and by that I mean, if you find yourself only with one choice in any particular area, you probably haven't had the right conversation to arrive there. So anytime you find yourself in a cul-de-sac with any part of tech or a choice or a candidate, if you find yourself too quickly at a single answer, I would counsel you to step back. Think about how you can achieve an optimal outcome as opposed to a good outcome, right? A good outcome looks like we're on the top of the highest mountain, but when we're actually on a hill in a valley and we can't work out how far away we are. To know that you're on top of Everest, that's to have an optimal outcome. Build in time for sanctuary to contemplate what you're doing. Whether it's tech or non-tech, I think these things are very important. And I'm saying I mentioned Lord Hockey once, but the only one I quote him on semi-regular is I remember seeing him getting an award years ago, and he talked about he got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he talked about at a certain point in his career, many of his friends had become business contacts, and many of his business contacts had become friends. So recognise that a lot of your friends in the fullness of time might become business contacts and vice versa. Don't be too opportunistic about that, but just take a long view. And the last one is, on this journey of entrepreneurship, recognise that it is a sort of a staircase that you're going up. Right? It might be that it's a 100-click journey or a 1,000-click journey, but whatever that journey is, recognise if you do put one hand up the way to somebody who's a few clicks ahead and one hand down the way to somebody who's a few clicks behind, your position on the staircase is a little bit better secured as you make your journey up it. Right? This is what I think you should look for in a mentor. So that's if you had to give your mentor one line, that's the line you should give them, in my opinion. My outcome needs to be more important than your outcome. And I think that's true of every client experience. If we put the client first, if we put the mentee first, chances are the experience will be maximised. And that's what I've got to say for today.